I'd now like to introduce David Shoebridge, New South Wales Greens MP. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Jan. And thank you all for coming out here to stand before the British Consulate in Sydney and make one simple demand. Leave Julian Assange alone. Just yesterday, we saw one government stand up for an Australian citizen. We saw one government take the step and recognise that an Australian citizen in clear and imminent peril of being extradited to the United States for an extraordinary, unjust and grossly inhumane process, we saw one government stand up for this Australian citizen. And it was not our government. Exactly. It was the Ecuadorian government. The Ecuadorian government deserves our thanks, and it deserves the thanks not just of Julian Assange, a citizen of Australia, but it deserves the thanks of citizens from across the globe for standing up to give refuge to a man and a symbol for openness on this planet. Because let's be clear why it is that the Ecuadorian embassy in the United Kingdom is surrounded by British police. Let's be clear why it is our government is saying nothing about one of our citizens surrounded in those circumstances. It's because of what WikiLeaks has told the world. It's because WikiLeaks, through showing things such as that appalling collateral damage video, has shown for the first time ever to people in their lounge rooms what the true and brutal cost of America's war in Iraq, America's war in Afghanistan, which our government has been a willing and constant supporter of. It's shown the real face of that war. It is ugly, it is brutal, and it is indiscriminate death to citizens in those countries. The UK government doesn't like hearing about it. The Australian government doesn't like hearing about it. And of course, the government that's pulling all the strings, the United States government, doesn't want to hear about it. That's why there are police surrounding Julian Assange today, and we should call it for what it is, an attempt to silence the citizens of the world who for the first time were getting an insight into the ugly decision-making in the halls of Washington, Canberra and London. Rather remarkably, when the Ecuadorian government was assessing Julian Assange's refugee claim, his asylum claim, there was one box they had to tick under the convention. They had to ask themselves, was Julian Assange's home country, the country of his own nationality, taking any steps to protect him from the peril he was facing? And let's be clear, they looked at what Australia had done and they acknowledged under the Geneva Conventions that the Australian government was failing to protect Julian Assange. And that is why Ecuador had to act. We've seen nothing but silence from the Foreign Minister, Bob Carr, when it comes to standing up for a citizen. How remarkable is that any one of us would expect our Foreign Minister to stand up and protect us if we were seeking consulate protection surrounded by police. But rather remarkably, Julian Assange does not get that protection. Today we're outside the British Consulate, calling on the British government to withdraw the police, withdraw the threats from the Ecuadorian Consulate, and leave Julian Assange at least to have removed from the threat of imminent violence for doing nothing other than making a claim for asylum from a friendly country. We had the quite remarkable situation of one friendly country, Ecuador, granting asylum to an Australian citizen. One would think a friendly country to the United Kingdom, yet still being surrounded by troops and having the threat, blind to the Vienna Convention, that they will break into the Ecuadorian embassy and physically and violently remove Julian Assange. And what does our government say? Not one word. Shame on our government. Shame! We will continue, whether it's in rallies like this in Sydney, Australia, whether it's rallies in Washington, whether it's those brave people who've stood up in the United Kingdom, brave UK citizens who've stood up for the rights of Julian Assange, we will continue to highlight the inaction of the Australian government. We'll call for protection of Julian Assange, and we make the continuing demand. We want a new era of transparency. We want to see what decisions are being made by our governments, and we want WikiLeaks and that project of global openness to continue to be at the forefront of it. Thank you all for coming.